I want to make a little introduction to the church concerning the history of the church, because of course such a church have a history, and it would be rather short, this lecture about it, because in a way it's I will not go very much or very deep into it, but of course this is originally a Methodist church. It's a Lutheran church, but a part of it, the Lutheran Methodist church, was actually in the tradition the workers' church. It have started. Methodist church was built here in Denmark, or here in Horsens, in 1902, and drawn of an architect called Christian Jørgensen. This was a local architect that the Methodists actually asked to draw their church. The Methodists have roots in England in the 1700s, and it was, as I said, actually the workers' church in the industrial areas of Great Britain. It moved to America and actually grew very big, and about 1858 it came to Denmark. There was a rather big population because the Horsens was a very big industrial city, so there was a lot of workers, and therefore they meant that they also want to have a church here, and they placed it actually in the area, in the industrial area at that time in Horsens, and a lot of the workers actually lived very nearby. It was also therefore you give a clock to the church, because they want, as Ragnhild said, they don't have watches as we have, so the only watch they actually have was this 3 watches in the tower. And therefore they could, from their apartments and other places, actually could look up at the church and say, okay, it's only 10 minutes till I have to be at work. But they also used it during the day, in the afternoon, in their free time. It was the only timetable they actually have on the tower. So that was actually rather good. As I said, the church was placed in the workers' area, and it was therefore also a kind of meeting point for every workers at that time. So they have a common room, and in the basement originally, the vicar for the church have an apartment, and the caretaker also have an apartment. So there was actually 2 apartments down in the basement at that time. But as I said here, and in the basement there was also a common room for the workers to meet after the service, but also in between the services. So they actually have a meeting room. It was actually a meeting point, as I said, for the workers in the area. It have changed. As I said also, the clock have been given from a factory called Kromann Goldsmith, and it was a clothing factory, and it was actually the clothing factory's workers that give the bell or the watches to the tower. In 2006, there was only 6 Methodists left. In a way, there's a lot of workers, but only 6 that call themselves Methodists. And they have a problem because a vicar is expensive, such a church is expensive to take care of. So they actually ended up to ask the board of the Saviour's Church if perhaps we was interested in buying it. And in a way we say, okay, we could buy it, but for what purpose? We actually have a church already and so on. But then we negotiate with them and ask them how much it will cost. And at that time, this church will cost, if we go into the lists, it will cost about 13 million crowns. And we actually get it in the negotiation for about 700,000 crowns, so it was actually rather cheap. So we say, okay, we buy it, and then we can see if something can go on here. And there is actually a lot of activities. There are activities for a choir down here that make rehearsals and other things. There's knitting ladies that sit in the basement, and in a way there are a kind of activities that could give it its purpose. But anyhow, the church in the end find out that they want to sell it when they are finished with the restoration, perhaps in the big church, because the big church in the square in Søndergade, well, our Saviour's Church is actually getting restored right now, and therefore the church actually used this as the main church until the restoration is finished. When the restoration is finished, I think they will begin to talk about that they have to sell this, and therefore, of course, it's a very good idea that we try to make some suggestions in the 5th semester. The church is actually very typical for 1902, because that was in a way a kind of mixed tradition. It is actually called historicism or historicism, where the architect was totally free in one way or another. They used all the styles that actually was in the past and mix it and find out to make something. But there were certain rules for churches when they made it a new church. A church from outside should actually look like a Gothic church. And therefore most of the churches that is built from 1902 and up till about 1930 was actually built as a Gothic church. A little Gothic church inspired by all the things that the Gothic church actually have. We call it neo-Gothic, and very special for that is the rosette. You can see it in all the Gothic churches all around Europe, Notre Dame or whatever. There is always rosettes, and in this church there's actually 3 rosettes here in the facade to the west, I think, and then in the front also, and also in the other facade there is rosettes that actually shows that this is actually a Gothic church. There's also this big windows, high Gothic windows that give a lot of light into the room, but they missed a little bit because they actually have made a Roman arch in the top. They should have been the Gothic arch that is very steep and ended up in a corner, but it was perhaps too difficult or expensive to make, So they ended up to make it with the round shape. But anyhow, it looked Gothic. And then, of course, the spire is very, very typical for the Gothic church, this tower and the spire up in the top. It's a feature that you also can see anywhere where you look at Gothic churches. So in a way you can say that this architect, Christian Jørgensen, he was in the same mood as everybody else at that time and get inspired by the Gothic church. But then it's a funny thing because it's a total other thing that you see when you step into the church. It's a total other style. It's not a Gothic style. It's actually, could you say, a kind of Baroque classicism. And that's a funny thing, because in that time, normally the church's inside was national romantic. In a way, a kind of Viking style in Scandinavia. But Christian Jørgensen here, he actually was perhaps very fond of classicism and Baroque. And therefore he, in one way or another, both in the gallery, as you see, and the columns for the gallery, and the top here, and absolutely the ceiling and the front in the pulpit is very Baroque classicism in one way or another. But of course he want also to put in this national romantic Viking style. So the cantilever up here is that. It is actually a kind that could be in a Viking place or whatever. It was very typical, and very typical for the churches, especially inside, that this national romantic style from Scandinavia, going backwards, that they was inspired of this Viking style. You can also see it in the pulpit. That's also a little bit with the cross, and more or less the way it actually have been built is a kind of national romantic Viking style in one way or another. So in this room you in a way have a mix both of classicism, Baroque and national romantic style. You can also see the paintings around here the whole way is more or less also a part of this national romantic style. It could also be in a Viking barn where the Vikings actually was situated, or where they actually think it was inspired from what they think the Vikings actually lived. So in a way, this is what I could actually say about this church concerning the styles. Of course, it's a good thing if you also keep the style both outside and inside, and because it's in a way a church that haven't been touched since 1902. Nobody actually have got in and really make big restorations, change things and make it modern or anything. It's actually more or less as it was when it was built. And therefore, in a way, in my opinion, you really have to be careful when you change the things rapidly. But of course, if there's modern things as an office or a family house or whatever you want to actually put into it, a culture house or perhaps a main office for a big company or whatever, then of course you have to change certain things. But keep in mind that there is actually these styles that the architects from the original have been inspired from. And I think you should really think about keeping most of it, because it haven't been touched since 1902. Yes, the cantilever here is in this romantic style, the Viking style. And there's the last room here where we also have the organ and this very nice gallery. So in a way you can also say that a bad thing about the gallery is actually that you mustn't use it today because of the fire protection. So there's not it's not enough escape ways from the gallery. So therefore you actually have to be down here instead of actually using the gallery perhaps. And of course if you have to use it, then you have to make access for escape in the gallery in one way or another, in a better way than it actually is today. But anyhow, this is what I actually want to say concerning history of the church.